and Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law School Professor Emeritus. Good to have you. So, Professor, we start with you. Is Dowd correct?
No, he's not. Of course, the president can be charged with obstruction of justice if he engages in acts beyond what Article 2 of the Constitution allows him to do. President Nixon and Clinton were both impeached for obstructing justice by telling witnesses to lie. Nixon for paying hush money and destroying evidence. My point is that the president cannot be charged for simply exercising his authority under the Constitution by pardoning people, by firing people he's allowed to fire, without regard to what his subjective intent may be. It's much like Article 1, which says that senators and congressmen have limited immunity from arrest for performing their duties under Article 1 of the Constitution. That's my point, and it should not be confused with a different point that says the president's above the law, or the president can never be charged with obstruction of justice. Keep my point clear. That's what I've said. All right.
Let me know if I keep it clear, Professor. Jeffrey Toobin, the words subjective intent stand out to me in what the professor just said. His position seems to be you can't look at why the president did it unless it fits into certain extra legal categories. How do you see it?
I disagree with my mentor, Alan, on that one, because I mean, I think, just to specify the core of our disagreement, Alan thinks, and Alan will correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no way that firing James Comey can be obstruction of justice because he has the legal right as president to fire James Comey. I think that is completely wrong, because I think the subjective intent can be considered by Congress in impeachment. For example, if he did it for corrupt motives, if he did it to protect his own liability, if he did it to protect his own financial interest, if he did it for corrupt motives, that is obstruction of justice, and that is an impeachable offense.
Why wasn't President George Bush the first impeached or prosecuted? He pardoned Caspar Weinberger and 5 other people for the explicit purpose of bringing an end to the Iran-Contra investigation by Special Counsel Lawrence Walsh, and that's what Lawrence Walsh said. Yet nobody suggested that he had committed any kind of a criminal offense for doing so. So, by the way, I'm getting now repeatedly attacked by the people on the right for saying that Hillary Clinton can't be prosecuted because of her subjective intent. We're seeing the shoe on the other foot now all over the place. People are now screaming for Hillary Clinton. I'm defending both of them. I don't want to see the criminalization of political differences. I don't want to see laws like espionage, obstruction of justice used against political enemies on either side.
Well, I mean, I'm not screaming and I'm not attacking Alan, and I don't know what other. I know that people on Twitter are being unpleasant because that's what Twitter is. But the fact is, we cannot give immunity to top officials like the president because the Constitution gives them certain responsibilities. Let me give you an example.
How about the Senate? How about the Senate?
Well, let's talk about the president for now.
Okay, but we have to talk about the Senate,
Alan,
too.
Let me just give you an example. Suppose, a member of al-Qaeda walks into the president's office and says, here's a suitcase full of cash. Pardon someone who went
that's such a simple, obvious case. He's guilty of bribery. He's guilty of bribery. You can convict the president of bribery. You can convict the president of telling witnesses to lie. What you cannot convict the president of is simply and merely exercising his Article 2 authority by pardoning somebody or by firing somebody. That's my point. You cannot do that. You may be able to impeach him for misuse of his power, but you cannot prosecute him for exercising his constitutional authority any more than you can prosecute a senator for exercising his constitutional authority. Of course, if a senator takes a bribe, you can go after him for that. But you cannot go after the president merely for exercising his constitutional authority. And these hypotheticals about taking bribes and al-Qaeda, support my position. That's why Nixon and Clinton were impeached, for going beyond their mere authority under Article 2 of the Constitution.
Well, I think you're drawing a distinction where one doesn't exist. But let me just say that the constitutional question of whether a president can be indicted for anything, whether obstruction of justice, robbing a bank, stealing a car, that's a question that has never been resolved. And I don't even know, I certainly don't know what the appropriate answer is, because there is a school of thought that says a sitting president can't be indicted because he is the embodiment of the executive branch.
It's instructive in this way, is that we're not going to answer it. I'm not talking about in this session. I haven't been saying anything because I'm fascinated by this. I love that you guys are talking about this. But Mueller isn't going to indict the president. That's not what's going to happen here procedurally. He is going to wind up putting out information. It would wind up being kicked over to Congress. That's why people like Dershowitz, Jeffrey, have been arguing that this should have been a commission all along, because it's going to wind up being resolved politically, not legally. But let me get a quick final point from each of you. Professor.
Well, let's remember what happened with Nixon. He was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. Right. So Mueller can do that. I'm saying it would be wrong to name him as an unindicted co-conspirator for the act of obstruction of justice if all he did was exercise his presidential authority to pardon, commute, or fire. That's my point. Simple as that.
And my point is